Welcome to the Ketones and Coffee Podcast with Lawrence Manaig, where we explore the ketogenic lifestyle and how it can improve your physical and mental health. Each week, we bring you valuable insights and advice from experts to help you on your journey to a healthier lifestyle. This episode is brought to you by BasicKetogenicLifestyle.com, where Lawrence coaches individuals with depression to reverse their symptoms and achieve a healthier, happier life using an evidence-based approach. So sit back, relax, and join us as we dive deep into the world of ketones and coffee. Subscribe to the Ketones and Coffee Podcast today and never miss an episode.
I'm so excited for this, guys. Stick around because we got Beth Basham, is a registered dietitian, intuitive mindful eating coach, and a yoga instructor with a background in functional medicine and women's health. Her journey in the field of nutrition and wellness spans nearly 2 decades, allowing her to accumulate a vast knowledge and experience in the field. She has been guiding hundreds of women towards a healthier and more balanced relationship with food. Beth, welcome to the Ketones and Coffee Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here today.
It's my pleasure, Beth. And I'd love for our listeners to get to know you better. And I think your personal journey is incredibly inspiring. Could you please share your own story with us, particularly how you became passionate about intuitive eating and mindfulness in the context of nutrition?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this is such a great question. And I would say that my practice is very much formed and shaped by my experience. So I think like a lot of people in the world, we are very subjected to a lot of messages about what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, what we should look like, what we should not look like. And there's a lot of shoulding, right? So that was an example of just the beginning of my journey, like it is for so many, where I grew up a young woman in the Midwest of the US. And I grew up in a pretty good family life, but I was subjected to those same messages that a lot of women do, that being thin is better. I was a dancer. I danced throughout high school into college. So I was constantly looking at myself in the mirror and comparing myself against myself, but also other people. And in my early 20s, I declared my major in nutrition, because I discovered that if I could know everything there was to know about the calorie content, fat, protein, all the things about food, that I would be able to control my body and stay thin for the rest of my life. And underneath that, of course, there was an element of self-worth that I didn't realize was a component of my journey that would unravel later on. But I started this journey as a dietitian with, I would say even a bit of a disordered outlook on nutrition because of my deep desire to conform to society's ideal standards. So the journey went on. I became the dietitian I had set out to be, and my health started failing. So I was doing all the quote unquote things. I was restricting calories. I was teaching fitness classes. I was working out like a beast in the gym, lots and lots of cardio, weights, you name it. Got really into health and fitness, started my yoga journey at that time too. However, I recognized my hair started falling out. The number on the scale actually kept creeping up despite this heavily weighted control I had over things. Okay. So I felt like a fraud, right? Here I was, a young dietitian with all this head knowledge. And I had, in this experience, detached my head from the rest of my body, and I was no longer listening to what my body needed. I was doing the things that society told me to do, to restrict calories, to exercise more. And as a result, my health started to decline. And in retrospect, I likely had some thyroid issues. I never got tested, but some adrenal and thyroid issues as it relates to overexercise and under eating. But in the long story short, I actually discovered, I was about 25, 26 years old, and I discovered this thing called intuitive eating. And between you and me, Lawrence, I thought, ooh, this is the way I get to fix myself. I'm going to do this course because I had to do continuing education to maintain my licensure as a dietitian. So I did this course on intuitive eating thinking, this is how I'm going to figure out myself so that I can help my clients figure out themselves, right? And what I discovered in that journey actually broke open a lot of doors for me to help me realize that I hadn't been in touch with my body, that I was doing things that weren't in
Mhm.
alignment with what my unique body needed. And so it created actually the experience, my health healed so quickly when I started listening to my internal
Mm.
body cues, when I started to drop out of my headspace
Yeah.
into my body and started to listen to those signals. So, fast forward another 15 years, and here I am.
Mhm.
I'm so passionate about intuitive eating, but also integrating a lot more of the mind body work into the
Mhm.
nutrition work, right? So there's a bridge there that we can certainly
Yeah.
talk to if you'd like, but that's just a quick snapshot of my story.
Wow. That's a pretty detailed story, and the fact that you have overcame a lot of those, and you've been doing this for about 20 years now, is incredible. Yeah.
Give or take. Give or take,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the thing that I love about that is listening to your body. I mean, that connection is always important, right? Because at some point we lose that connection, and sometimes we don't know where we lost it. But for you, you said it was after school, and you realized that it wasn't you weren't following you weren't listening to your body anymore. Talk us through that, because how were you able to reconnect that?
Yeah.
Because for some people, many people struggle with finding that balance between just the relationship with food and their bodies. How did you overcome that for you, and what was happening?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And just to answer even the first part of that, I always tell my clients and the people I work with that you were born with an innate sense of what you
Mm,
need, right? If you watch, I have a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I watch them at the kitchen table and they listen to their bodies. They eat to
mm,
fullness. They stop. They say, no, thank you. They're really actually quite good at this intuitive eating thing. And the unlearning process takes
mm,
years. So you were saying, like, when did that start? It took years. It takes a lot of those repetitive messages over time to lead to that loss of trust or that loss of connection with our body. And we're writing these scripts and narratives throughout our young childhood into our young
mm,
adulthood that have an impact on us for years, if not the entirety
mm,
of our lives. So I just say that to preface that when I first stepped into the intuitive eating world, I didn't know that I had a whole bunch of scripts and narratives running that were
mm,
driving this kind of obsessive, confused space when it came to listening to my body, right? I didn't trust myself. At the base of it, it's like I didn't trust myself. And it was through some, we call it interoceptive awareness in the intuitive eating world. It's a practice, just like yoga's a
mm,
practice, like weight training's a practice, anything in the world, right? Interoceptive awareness is a practice that you learn over time. It's not a switch that we flip on and all of a sudden we can hear our body cues. It's usually because it took so long to unlearn, there is a process to relearning and reconnecting to the
Is that
body.
as simple as knowing what's good for you? Or I know you said this is a daily practice, and I understand that because obviously we live in a world that doesn't have your best interest, to say the least, right? Where there's gross fast food at every corner of of your city. Where you go to your grocery store, it's box meals everywhere with a lot of food additives, and it really destroying our the processed foods are really destroying our body. Is it that simple, or it's deeper than that? Is it because it causes a lot of this dysfunction and emotion within our bodies that's why it's not that simple?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's simple and
Mm,
it's not. There's some duality to this answer because, again, if you look at the young child and you watch them naturally interact with their environment, they very often, especially in the younger
mm,
side, those toddlers and infants, they know what
mm,
they need, right? And they easily adjust their caloric
mm,
needs based on their energy expenditure, if you will. Like there's just this really natural balance that happens. And so what I believe you're asking, Lawrence, is like how do we Well, let me have you rephrase the question, Lawrence, if that's okay. I just want to make sure I'm answering it
Yeah, no,
correctly.
because I just want to figure out if for me as a person that lives this lifestyle, I want to learn for myself, and maybe the listener is I want for them to understand how how can they learn it for themselves, right? How can they identify it in themselves
Yeah.
too? Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's where I was going with this. Sorry, when we're getting passionate about what we talk about, it's easy
Mhm.
to just like drift off in our brain and take tangents. So yeah, to really clarify here, yeah, there's a balance, right? We do live in a world that has been presented with food options that are not native to what we maybe
Mhm.
evolved on, right? So we are in a food environment that has changed
Mhm.
dramatically. And a huge question that people have when they step into my world is like, well, if I just start listening to my body, all I'm going to want to eat all day is Twinkies and
Mhm.
bonbons, and I'm never going to eat like the quote unquote
Mhm.
healthy foods, right? And so, and when we are passionate about our health and we
Right.
want to do the best by our body, we do, there is a
Mhm.
balancing act to discover for each
Mhm.
individual. And for most individuals, Lawrence, and this may or may not be the person, the listener to this podcast, because they may already have some of this interoceptive awareness, or they may have discovered that they really have never
Mhm.
cultivated that. So, when we're starting the intuitive eating journey, as it's outlined in the principles, there's a book actually called Intuitive Eating that listeners can pick up if this piques their curiosity. But one of the big principles is to neutralize all foods, is to drop that label good food, bad food, healthy, unhealthy, and instead, from an experimental lens, right, from the space of curiosity, start to witness how the body feels, right? Not the head and all the things that say, this is good and this is bad. If I eat this, then I'm going to gain a whole bunch of weight. If I eat
Mhm.
that, I'm going to stay slim, whatever that dialogue is. It's working to drop that
Mhm.
and start to see all food on the same playing field. Now, here's where it gets tricky. People are like, "Well, if Twinkies are on the same playing field as broccoli, like I'm never going to eat
Mhm.
broccoli." What we find, it's so ironic because what tends to happen for most intuitive eaters is there is a pendulum swing. They will consume maybe foods they've been restricting for years or decades, and that can feel really scary. That can feel really uncomfortable. It can feel terrifying to
Mhm.
certain individuals. But with the practice of cultivating this neutrality and this curiosity, what I've discovered from my own journey and those of my clients is that the pendulum does swing and balance is regained because when we truly are listening to the body, for most individuals, those processed foods that you mentioned earlier don't, like, they truly don't serve us. Great example. I drank a ton of Diet Coke when I was in my 20s. It was like my fuel because I wasn't eating enough calories, right? So I was like downing this caffeinated soda. At some point or another, I decided that artificial sweeteners were no longer good for my body. So I stopped drinking it, right? I was like, oh, this isn't good for me. But I didn't do it because I felt bad drinking soda. I did it because everyone told me all
Mhm.
these things are quote unquote bad, right? Fast forward like 10 years after I'd canceled them out, I was like, you know what? I feel like a Diet
Mhm.
Coke out of the blue. And as an intuitive eater, I honored that and I allowed myself to drink the thing. But here's what happened. I didn't have external people telling me this is good or bad. I had my body and my stomach and my
Right.
sense of like, I just felt in my body so disgusting after eating this, drinking
Mhm.
this beverage for my body, right? It does not do well on artificial sweeteners. It just doesn't. And my neighbor might have a
Mhm.
completely different experience, and that's okay. But there's this opportunity to say, I'm not removing this
Mhm.
food because society tells me to. I'm removing this food because my body
Mhm.
genuinely feels its
Mhm.
best when this food is or is not in my body. So it takes
Mhm.
time to build that trust. Does
Yeah,
this answer your
yeah.
question, Lawrence? I hope
Yeah.
I'm touching on what you're
On
asking
the
here.
flip side though, Beth, how about when somebody says to you, I'm afraid to go on a off-plan meal or a cheat meal because maybe I they could go on and on with it, and they're just scared because maybe one day becomes a week or a month, and then that becomes a lot of weight put on. That's why they're scared of going on a cheat day. Have you ever encountered that?
Yeah.
That's fear?
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Hmm.
every single day with my community that
Yeah.
I interact with. That is probably the fear of weight gain is probably the most intense fear that the people I work with experience. And this is a great segue to speak about kind of the intricacies or nuances that I've discovered really support a person on this journey because usually fear, anxiety, some of those I call them depleted emotions. I don't call them
Mhm.
negative because I try to even
Yeah,
avoid
like that.
giving goodness and badness to our feelings, right? Like they're depleted. Maybe they don't feel the best in our body, but those fear and anxiety are typically driven by subconscious, like under consciousness narratives
Mhm.
and stories that have served to protect us over time. So again, I had mentioned there's a strong element of fat phobia and weight stigma in our culture, right? Fatness is seen as wrong, thinness is seen as
Mhm.
good, right? And as another health practitioner, you recognize like not everyone's going to have the same body size or shape. There's a variety of humans on this planet and different levels of fatness or thinness that are quite healthy, right? And so however, we have these ideas in our head that if we gain weight or we lose weight that says something morally right or wrong about us. And so it perpetuates this fear and this drive to be in this perfect
Mhm.
body. Okay. So diet is one way that some of us, some individuals have, and myself included of the past, it is how I controlled my body. And not having control of my
Mhm.
body meant that I couldn't trust my body to find equilibrium on its own. Do
Mhm.
you see? Like many people who are driven to follow restrictive diets, in some cases, not all. I'm really speaking stereotypically here, but because I recognize there's a lot of people with a lot of
Mhm.
different backgrounds and why they do the things with food that they do. But the idea here is that fear and anxiety are driving the show. They're not working from a place of
Mm.
wholeness. Does that make
Mm.
sense, Lawrence? Like when I use that term wholeness, like we're operating from fear or anxious feelings rather than working from this place of wholeness and integrated authenticity, I would say, an integrated authentic self versus a self that's like
Yeah.
driven by these undercurrents of narrative.
Yeah,
Sorry if that I'm
yeah.
trying to help
Yeah, no,
clarify
I
it.
myself likes to think that I practice meditation as well. I
Mhm.
practice about 10 minutes of meditation every day. That's as much as I could do in a daily basis for now. But it does help calm down the nerves, right? And then sometimes, Beth, ideas will come up because I'm not so stressed and I'm not sure how it works. Maybe you can tell me how that works. But when you're calm and when you're centered, sometimes wisdom comes up, right? And then great decisions comes from that. In my experience, is that something that's along the lines of what you're trying to say? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, totally. And I'll label it because some listeners may want to go like do their own research, but what I call this, and this is where the deeper components of my work come through, is this idea of rebalancing or finding
Hmm.
regulation in our nervous
Hmm.
system so that we can access exactly what you were just talking
Hmm.
about, Lawrence. When you're in meditation, your system has calmed down. You said your nervous system is this giant operating thing that innervates the entire body. It's how we sense, we feel, we interact with our environment. When that system is at peace or is content, wisdom,
Hmm.
ideas, social connection, social engagement, that is where the intuitive
Hmm.
eater, the eater who knows how to trust themselves to eat this or not eat that, all that trust resides in that space.
Hmm.
And so the practice is not to always live there, but for so many, they're living on in the nervous system, but they're living in the side of the nervous system that some people might refer to as the
Hmm.
sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight. So there's two general sides to the autonomic nerve. Do you mind if I go into this just a
Yeah, yeah,
tad,
let's do. You know
Lawrence,
what? It's a
so
great
listeners can
segue
understand?
to that, and let's learn it. I want to learn it because it's something that piques my interest. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I can just talk about this for ages. So I'll do my best to keep it really simple, and then of course let listeners go and discover more for themselves. But the nervous system, also known as the autonomic nervous system, is has two sides to it that are most commonly known as the sympathetic
Mm-hmm.
and the parasympathetic. And the sympathetic is oftentimes related to fight or flight. So it's you're in the woods, a predator, you see a bear in the woods, your heart starts to beat really fast. You're like, "Oh my gosh, like I have to get away from this bear." Your sympathetic side of your nervous system is activated and you're able to run super fast away from that bear, climb up a tree, whatever it is you need to do to escape. It's there to keep you safe, right? You need all that extra adrenaline. You need that norepinephrine to get you out of danger, right? And on the flip side, you might consider in nature the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. That's more where meditation lies, but on the very, very opposite end of it is also this response that might be related to that deer in headlights, that freeze response, that I want to hide in my turtle
Mm-hmm.
shell response, where like you can't physically interact with the world. People who experience crippling
Mm-hmm.
depression may, in their nervous system, spend a lot of time on that very opposite end side of the parasympathetic nervous system, where they literally don't even know how to get out of bed in the morning. Their defense, the way that they're staying safe in their world, is by staying closed in.
Mm-hmm.
Does this
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sense?
Ha-
So yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I just want to ask in relations to regulating your body and the food we eat. How does that all
Yeah.
relate to that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So, as I mentioned, when you're in that you were just talking, Lawrence, like when I
Mm-hmm.
meditate, I just feel like the ideas come in. What you're actually experiencing is something called, in the nervous system world, is called ventral vagal. I know it's a term that you don't have to memorize, but it is this space where connectedness, trust, opportunities, ideas, that's where you come alive in your purpose and your passion, right? And this is where most of us would like to spend more time, right? What I see happen in so many of the clients that I work with is that their operating system is very small in that space, in that ventral vagal space. And what they're actually operating more from, and I'm just going to use this as an example because you could be on either side of the spectrum when it comes to food. But what they're operating is more of a fight or flight. Like I must fight my body to stay thin. I must eat these
Mm-hmm.
foods or else. There is a strong sympathetic fight or flight response to themselves, right? Again, this is a form of protection and safety. The body does this not because it wants you to fail, quite the opposite. It wants to keep you safe. So when you grow up in a world that says you must look like this, success looks like this, and to get success, you must hustle and work hard. What you're doing is you're building your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight center, to be activated more of the time. And you begin to operate there, and that's where we start to lose trust with our body. We're frantically trying to discover what's the best way to eat, what's the best way to exercise. Like, I must control my body because if I don't and I gain 20 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
so and so is not going to love me. So and so is not going to love me. The world is going to think that I'm ugly or fat or wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we're perpetually stuck in the sympathetic drive and we're making decisions that are not equated to trusting our body. They're generally related to fix it energy, I call it. Like, I need to fix myself in order to be safe. So the threat is no longer the bear. The threat is society, it's social belonging, it's a lot of other driving factors. I hope that brings it all together,
Yeah,
Lawrence.
no, it's you talk about it. It's it's a really complicated matter for somebody to really dive into, but that's really eloquently put. If I must say, I did not really connect the nervous system with just regulating your body and the food we eat. And if people are pressured by society to really look a certain way and be a certain way, then that's not a way to live, right? And how did they start now correcting that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first step is
Mhm,
awareness, Lawrence, is just starting to notice where you're making your food and body
mhm,
decisions from,
mhm,
right? So, is there a background voice saying you
mhm,
should do blank? The shoulding voice is a pretty is more quick to recognize for many individuals. I should do this. I should do that. I should, right? That's a pretty quick voice to identify. There are some
mhm,
deeper voices that can you can discover, but that first step is getting yourself into a place of
mhm,
awareness. And for some, meditation works. For others, some of the
mhm,
tools I use with clients include the emotional freedom technique or tapping, just body scans, meditation, heart centered breathing, where you just literally, it's so
mhm,
simple. You just put your hand on your heart and you just focus your attention breathing your breath in and out of your heart center. That really relaxes the
mhm,
nervous system so that you can engage with more of your body signals versus like the external forces. But I mean, just to really keep this super, super simple and concrete, I would say
mhm,
awareness is the first step. Just notice, am I making this decision to eat
mhm,
blank because I should or because I want
mhm,
to? And just looking at the energy behind that.
mhm,
Is it a shoulding energy or is it a this is cultivating health for me and it feels really good? There's a difference in the energy between those two ways of operating.
mm. How does one really develop that in themselves? What's because you said identify and then acceptance, right? It's really. Did you say
Mm,
acceptance or
mhm.
awareness?
Well, that comes no, I
Awareness,
said awareness, but you actually the second step is
acceptance. Okay.
acceptance. So it's like we're on the same wavelength.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to get to help people and really identify it within themselves right now, maybe as they're listening. Any, what are the, what should they identify more
Mhm.
of in themselves? Like you said, the voice.
Yeah.
There's a voice of really, what's a voice again? Can you repeat that? The voice of,
No, yeah, I call it you could call it an
yeah,
inner critic, a
yeah,
shoulding voice. There's a voice basically without getting I could talk about parts work and a
yeah.
million other things. I will not. I'll make this really easy. The clients that I find are being driven by that fight or flight side of our nervous system. They're
Mm,
making those decisions based on fear and
mhm,
anxiety, right? What the signs are that I see are that people are constantly thinking about their weight,
uh,
the food they're eating. When they're meal planning, they're trying to just be perfect. There's a lot of perfectionism around this. So if someone's listening, if you're thinking about food 24/7, if you look in the mirror and every time you look in the mirror, you look at that image and you just feel disgust
mhm,
or hatred, right? There that could be a signal that you're living and operating from that fight or
mhm,
flight type of response. If you are trying to do the diet or the thing because you think it will fix you,
mm,
right? It's going to fix you. That's another indication that perhaps you are dysregulated a bit in your nervous system and you don't trust yourself
mm.
and trust your innate ability to eat the foods that are nourishing for you. Is
Yeah,
this
yeah.
helping, Lawrence? Do you
So
feel like this,
they're
yeah, answering the
basically
question?
lost that connection within their body, and you're reconnecting them. Mm.
And it starts through the
Starts with the
awareness. Yeah,
awareness.
it starts through that awareness of just noticing, ooh, what is
Mm,
driving this behavior? Thoughts
mm,
precede
mm,
emotions, and emotions drive behavior. So we kind of are reverse engineering it, right? The behavior, or a common thought of my client is they'll look at a piece of
yeah,
cheesecake, okay, and they'll instantly think, oh my God, if I eat that, I'm going to
yeah,
get my thighs are going to explode.
yeah,
There's going to be some like really
mm,
quick tangible. That's the thought, right? That's the thought that's
yeah.
driving the emotion and then driving the behavior, avoidance of even looking at if I even look at that cheesecake, I'm gonna whatever, but fill in the blank. So it's looking at that and saying, is that a fear-based response or is that based on how my
Yeah.
body actually reacts if I eat that
Mm,
food? Because truth be told, some people in context may eat the cheesecake, feel fine. Other people may feel
yeah.
really not great. And so It's what are you driving the behavior from? What thoughts, what emotions are driving the behavior versus the behavior itself?
Mm. How about you? What's that aha moment for you when when you flip the switch back? What was your aha moment
My aha moment
when you
was when,
reconnected with your body and
yeah,
the food that you eat?
well, it was, I will, yeah, I will tell you, like, when I reconnected with my body, it was not like
Mm-hmm.
a light switch that turned on. It was more of a gradual process, but I started with giving myself
Okay.
permission to neutralize foods and start experimenting with foods that I'd been avoiding for
Mm.
years and allow my body to give me feedback versus society and the nutrition books to give me feedback. I gave myself that permission to stop counting calories. I gave myself the permission to take rest days with my
Mhm.
exercise. And interestingly and ironically, when I started working and operating from this way of being, that I am on my way to trusting myself more deeply. Like, I would say that was
Mm.
kind of the operational mantra underneath the
Mhm.
shift. What happened is that my health corrected itself without medication,
Mm.
without more fix it energy. It was like my weight stabilized, my hair grew back, my energy returned. I felt like myself again. And the proof was in the
Mhm.
pudding, pun intended there. The proof was in that permission and in that exploration of
Mhm.
this new way. It's like a way of
Mhm.
being, Lawrence. It's a way of operating from this place of self-trust versus this place of trying to fix myself as if I were this
Mhm.
broken thing that needed fixing. And that's what wholeness work is. It's learning how to operate from this space of I'm not broken and I don't need to be fixed. And we can make decisions from that way of operating so much more clearly.
So your body is essentially helping you find the right foods, eat the right meal for your body. Mhm.
Correct. Yeah. And there was a pendulum swing. Like, I ate things that maybe didn't serve my body in the beginning, but after I found that stabilization point, I crave,
Mhm.
and I'm going to put air quotes around healthy because that's going to look different for every individual, but I crave
Mhm.
vegetables. When I don't get enough veggies, I want
Mhm.
them. It's not from a place of, oh, you must have 9 servings of vegetables and fruit a day. It's from a place of, I can't wait to
Mhm.
nourish myself with more
Mhm.
vegetables today. And then it's practicing flexibility. I have 2 young kids. Like, some days I don't eat exactly the way, eat quote unquote perfectly for me. And it's
Yeah.
being compassionate and kind to
Mm.
myself and recognizing it's
It's
just one
okay.
day. This is one day in the
Yeah.
context of many, many, many days, years,
Yeah.
months, etc. So it's also a self-compassionate opportunity to love yourself a little more through that process.
I understand that because there's a lot of people who come to keto. There's a lot of people who came from binging and purging and punishing themselves whenever they would eat quote unquote bad food, right? And they come to maybe carnivore, more restriction, so that they they feel like they're secure because it's more simple. It's eating this and this and that's it, right? And I can understand how
Mhm.
that can also be unhealthy, right? Because you haven't really fixed the root cause, which is the underlying cause, and the issue is you have the issue with food, right? You still haven't solved that. Yeah.
Self-trust.
Mhm.
Yeah, self-trust, I would say, is usually self-trust is usually what drives
Mhm.
that. Now, there's nothing wrong with it though, right? Like, we don't wanna label that
Mhm.
as bad. We Somebody who has gone from a binging type of, relationship to food to using a meal plan to help keep them, quote, unquote, "safe," there's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with that. That person might find that that works for them. And if they're ready to discover more self trust, there are more layers and opportunities for
Mhm.
them there, right? Like, every person gets to follow their own journey, in my opinion. No one, not everyone has to do this relationship with
Yeah.
food work, right? There's not a shoulding on even that aspect, but it's an opportunity to just dig
Mhm.
deeper and say, ooh, what do I need right now? Like, that's the question my
Mhm.
clients ask moment to
Mhm.
moment. What do I
Yeah.
need right now? Do I need that bag of Cheetos, or do I need to call a friend? Do I need to go
Mhm.
for a walk? What do I need? What do I need to feel, right? A lot of people don't know how to feel their emotions because they've been told their emotions are
Mhm.
good or bad. So if they feel a negative emotion, they eat to avoid feeling
Mm.
guilt or shame, or you know what I'm saying? And that's where people who are binge eaters can tend to cover up their emotions with food. And so it's a process of increasing the capacity to feel more that
Mhm.
treats that root cause and also helps to bring
Mhm.
more trust into the
I love
process.
that, and just be more kind to yourself, right? We cannot be perfect all the time, right? So
Not at
yeah,
all.
sometimes
Yeah.
you crave something, right? Like you said, and then when you do try it, when you did try the Diet Coke, you felt your body broke down, and you felt like it wasn't good for you. Your body said it's not good for you, right? And that's like a great reminder, right? That okay, hey, this wasn't bad. This was well. How do you call that, right? If it's not bad food, what do you say? Language is important, right?
It is, yeah, you could use so with emotions, I use depleted and
Mm,
renewing. So you could do the same thing with food. This food depletes me, this food
mm,
renews me or
okay,
nourishes me, right? Like you use the word
okay.
nourish. Language is important. Yeah, you could absolutely kind of shift the language and narrative. This is a
Mhm,
renewing meal for me in this
mm,
moment, and or this is a depleted food option
mm,
for me, right? And so it's paying attention to and not giving not as it's not permission to beat yourself up if you did eat something that does feel
mhm,
depleting to you, right? Like there's there's no shame that needs to be brought into this equation either. Like we can release that or actually feel it and move through
mhm,
it. It's the more probably more healthy way
mhm,
to do it. But gosh, wow, I notice I'm feeling this like guilt around eating this food because I do feel depleted now. I feel like crap. You know, my stomach hurts.
mm,
Maybe I have to go to the bathroom more often, whatever it is. And we can start to feel
mhm,
really bad about that food choice. And this is that self
mhm,
compassionate opportunity to say, wow, isn't this
mm,
interesting? Isn't this interesting that my body responded this way? How can I be more loving to it today? What can I
mhm,
do tomorrow to support it coming back to balance, if you will? That would be more of the
mhm.
voice of the intuitive or trusting eater,
How long
if
of
you
the
will.
process is that? And from just like accepting, and then from awareness to acceptance, because I could imagine that it's we're conditioned that way. Sometimes people we are conditioned since we were children, right? And how long of the
Yeah.
process that can for some people I can't imagine that it's that easy, right? Like it's a long
Y-
process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different for every
Mhm,
individual. There's going to be people listening to us talk right now, and there's going to be switches that go off that will change how they look at food
mhm,
powerfully from here on forward, right? And there's others that have to hear it over and over and over again. The level of a person's level of trauma,
mhm,
a person's level of it, what their experience has been, the length of time they've been berating themselves, their body or food, their food options, it really will depend on the person. I've worked with people who are they get it in a few months and it's like, "Woo,
yeah.
I'm liberated." Yeah. And then I have other clients I've been working with for
Mm,
years, and there's not a rightness or a wrongness to either of those lengths of time. We all get I always like to look at this work as an opportunity because how we do anything is how we do
mhm,
everything, right, Lawrence? Our relationship to food can also mirror how we do relationships, how we do finances, how we do friendships. Like it's amazing the clients that come to work with me, they say a couple months in usually, "Beth, this was never about food, was it?" I'm like, "Nope." This was mirrored into a lot of other areas of my life. Great example for what I'm going through personally is parenting. So, holding space for my emotions as a parent is a completely different experience as it relates to holding emotions as an eater or as somebody who looks at my body and what she
mhm,
says to her body when she looks in the mirror. But there's a lot of criticism that comes up. when I quote unquote parent right or
Mm-hmm.
parent wrong. And so there's always an opportunity to unfold. So I'm answering this question kind of like in a weird, giant, awkward way, but it's just to say everyone's timeline is different, but there's not a right timeline or a wrong timeline. It's this work is something we get to do. It's not something we have to do. It's an opportunity for deeper self-development and
Mm-hmm.
self-knowing, which I think is a gift regardless of if
Mm-hmm.
it takes 30 days or 30 years, right? If we're on the path, we're doing great things for
This is
ourselves.
why I love people like you who really has come up and overcame, right? And then now helping a lot of people do the same thing, because I call you as a true practitioner, because you practice what you preach, you've done it, you've helped a lot of women overcome as you overcame yourself, and you didn't just shut up about it, but you're talking about it, right? You're on here wanting to help that one person maybe to also overcome, right? That's why I love that you're sharing your story with me today. Do you find that certain personality traits though, or perfectionism, tend to be associated with this eating behaviors, stuff like that? Do you ever get to that, or no?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a
Mm-hmm.
box that anyone has to fit in. But there are some
Mm-hmm.
characteristics. People who swim in
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism, oftentimes, or it's more correlated with disordered eating or unhealthy relationship to food. But there's a lot of societal expectation. There's some estimates that 65 to 75, this is in research, 65 to 75% of women between the ages of 25 and 45 years old have disordered
Mm-hmm.
eating patterns. That's a significant number. And I'm sure not all of those women are perfectionists, but all of those women have been subjected to a lot of idealistic
Mm-hmm.
things that are ideas or concepts that their body has to be a certain way. So I wouldn't say I mean, there are like perfectionists, and I'm a perfectionist. Like I come from that very like type
Mm-hmm.
A perfectionist background thinking, like straight A student in school, always had to get high marks
Mm-hmm.
on scores on tests or I'd feel bad about myself. Like I have those personality traits, but I've worked with a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily fit into that box and they still feel really scared of eating certain foods, or they feel this
Mm-hmm.
like strong fear-based drive to do the things, the exercise or restricted dieting in order to get the result that they want. So
If so, well, how do you address the trait in your coaching, or do you address it?
I address the
Okay.
person. Like a trait isn't a human. Yeah, it's going to really depend on the person. Obviously,
Yeah.
their experience with food. If they've had trauma, I might want to work in partnership with a trauma counselor. There's a lot of elements. So it's very just like functional medicine is very
Mm-hmm.
personalized medicine. I would say the work that I do is very personalized to the individual.
How about that? Talk about that coaching process, from the beginning. What can one expect in the beginning, and then who do you actually like to work? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to work my coaching experience will look different for every person because it's personalized, but a lot of our initial coaching sessions are about getting to know each other and just understanding like the stories and really starting to bring awareness by storytelling. Like what are the stories I've been telling myself for so long? And then from there we start to look at somatic, which is just another word for body, ways to use the body, ways to talk about the nervous system, kind of like we talked about today, as well as shifting our identity or that internal space to move out of that fix it energy and into that I am already
Mm-hmm.
whole energy and begin to operate and discover what our body needs, how to deepen self trust over time. Okay. And again, it's going to look at different for every individual. And there's another part of your question that's escaping me.
Yeah, no, I think you're good. Just I wanna learn more about your
Okay.
coaching process in the beginning, and then towards, was that the second question? In the beginning, yeah, in the beginning. That's what I said.
Okay. I feel like there's this, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good. Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. So it's gonna, and then if other, I
Mm-hmm.
am a trauma informed counselor. So I do what I think my clients find is that I meet them where
Mhm.
they're at. Like there's not a drive or a need to do anything. It's about really moving as fast as their slowest
Mhm.
parts. So we join, and I don't know if that makes sense, Lawrence. Sometimes I use language from my background and people are like, what does that mean? But it's really partnering with a person where they are at in this present moment and just walking them along the path at the speed that matches
Mhm.
them and their personality and their needs. So,
Mm. Okay, so is there an assessment before you start with your clients?
yeah, just like any most practices, this is what you would ask, who do I work with? I work with women ideally. There's an assessment. And I do best working with women who are really
Mhm.
ready to let go of dieting, who are ready to let go of rigid eating patterns. They're
Yeah,
like there, but they just don't quite know
committed.
how, right? They're not really sure. They've never learned how. Yeah. And so they want some guidance and they're willing to really deeply and authentically work
Mm.
on themselves as a part of this process. So it's all about food and it's nothing about food,
Mm.
right? So I want to help guide them. They also want to be healthy. So again, there's this misnomer that if I just tell you to eat what you want, you're just going to go balls to the wall and eat all the things and gain a bunch of weight and just feel terrible. And so my objective is to really lead somebody to health and wellness. I do not take a weight-based approach. I don't beat the stick
Mhm.
of if you've lost weight, you achieved, and if you didn't lose weight, you didn't achieve. That is not my MO, but it's more
Mhm.
about how am I feeling
Yeah.
throughout the process and changing from the inside
Mhm.
out versus how we
Yeah.
typically operate, which is the
Yeah.
outside
It's more
in.
important
So,
to what they
yeah,
learn, right? After you're done with them. It's the tools that you
absolutely.
teach them, right? Which is great. Yeah, so when can people find you?
Yeah, thanks
Mhm.
for asking that, Lawrence. My website is
Mhm.
bethbasham.com. That's a great place to go if you're just kind of curious about the work I do. And I also have a free Facebook group for women. It's called Beyond Intuitive Eating, and it's easy to find with a search. I can
Mhm.
give Lawrence the link as well, but that's a Facebook group for women, primarily who are looking for ways. I do regular classes, master classes, trainings and whatnot to help a person decide if this pathway is right for them. And that's, like I said, Facebook Beyond Intuitive
Awesome.
Eating.
And yeah, we'll link everything down in the description box below so you guys can check that out right now. Thank you, Beth, for coming on and sharing your story here with us. I really love the story and I really love what you're doing and continue on helping women reconnect with their bodies and heal their bodies through holistically, right? Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. It was such a pleasure.
Appreciate you
Appreciate
too.
you.
Bye bye.
Subscribe to the Ketones and Coffee podcast today and never miss an episode.